Hello and welcome to my world. In this video I'll be doing something a little bit different, and I won't be featuring just one of my trucks, but I'll be showing two of my trucks here side by side so I can compare the two together and show you some of the differences between the two. So the two trucks that I'll be showing are my two modified Tamiya Clod Busters that you see here. On the left, the red one is the ESP King Clod, and on the right is my latest truck called Leviathan. And I can't take credit for this video. One of my viewers, Kenny, suggested that I do this and compare these two trucks together. So if you have seen my playlist on my channel called RC Monster Trucks, there are plenty of individual videos showing these two trucks on their own. But Kenny suggested that I show them side by side so to give an idea of how different they are. So, heads up, thank you Kenny for the video idea. So how these two trucks came about is, and I'll just give a little brief history of the two of them. So if you want any more detail about these trucks, take a look at any one of those individual videos that I made of the two that are in my RC Monster Trucks playlist. And there's plenty of information and details about both of these trucks individually. In this video, I'm just going to briefly go over the details and what makes these two trucks different. So the King Clod on the left was not built by me originally. It was built by the guy that started ESP Hobby Manufacturing. And ESP was one of the first, if not the first companies that made aftermarket parts for the brand new Clodbuster truck from Tamiya. And I had a bunch of ESP parts on my first Clodbuster, and I bought an ESP catalog, and the King Clod was on the front cover of the catalog, which was released around 1988. So ever since then I've always wanted the King Clod, and so I managed to buy it from one of its previous owners. And I did make a few changes to it, but not a lot. And mainly I just replaced all of the stock plastic Tamiya parts with machined aluminum parts from JPS and UK Monsters. And some of the things I ran into when I built the King Clod was that those were the reasons why I built the truck on the right, Leviathan, because it's kind of hard to express this in words, but when I started modifying the King Clod, and keep in mind, the modifications I made were not permanent. They can all be easily undone, and the truck can be quickly returned back to its original configuration because I kept all of the stock plastic Tamiya parts that I replaced with machined aluminum ones. But as I was working on the King Clod, there were some things that I wanted to change even more, but because the truck was, I don't want to say famous, but at least of all my trucks that I have in my fleet right now, it's probably the most famous truck that I have because it's the truck that ESP used as a demo vehicle for their products. And it was, as I said, featured on their catalog. And it also was in ESP magazine ads. And it also was on display in ESP Manufacturing's booth at various hobby trade shows. And so it's, like I said, it's not famous, but it is probably the best, most well-known truck that I have. It's probably will always be the most well-known truck that I've ever had because none of my other trucks have ever been on in a catalog, for example. So, but because it was so pictured in the catalog and ads and stuff like that, and I have that catalog, I didn't want to modify it too much. I did not want to modify it and take it too far away from its original intent, if that makes sense. When it was built by the guy that started ESP, I'm sure he had a vision for the truck in his mind, and that's the truck that graced the cover of the ESP catalog. But I did not want to make any permanent changes to it, and I did not want to go too far away from the original concept for the truck, the way it was built. So while that was cool, it's neat preserving somewhat modified Clod Buster history, but it also was kind of limiting, I found out, because there were some changes I really wanted to make to the truck, and I just couldn't bring myself to do that. And I know it sounds silly, I know. It's not like I'm putting a blower on the original Bullet Mustang that was driven by Steve McQueen and everybody loves. So it's not something like that, or it's not like modifying a General Lee Dodge Charger from the Dukes of Hazzard and turning it into a 4x4 monster truck. No, it's certainly nothing like that. I mean, but there was a part of me that said, in the back of my mind, as I was putting on the JPS gear cases and changing the wheels and stuff like that and putting new JPS ladder bars on it, in the back of my mind, I was still kind of, wondering, am I messing too much with Clod Buster history here? I don't want to go too far, and that sort of thing. So it's kind of limiting, and that's why one of the reasons why I created Leviathan on the right. Leviathan was completely for my own, out of my mind. In the back of my mind, I had planned how it would look and the parts I wanted to use, and it was all strictly up to me, just like all my other trucks that I've built through the years. I didn't have to have the pressure of trying to preserve the way it looked or anything like that. It was a free-for-all, and I could just do whatever I wanted to with it. So that's kind of how Leviathan came about. Just basically, I didn't want to be painted into a corner, and there were some modifications to the King Clod that I kind of thought about doing, but I didn't do them on that truck, and I did do them on Leviathan, because Leviathan, I could do whatever I wanted to with it. So here are the two trucks sitting face to face, and from this view, you can see how Leviathan is a little bit taller. And that is because the Crawford Performance Engineering, or CPE Time Warp chassis that it's based on, has an adjustable suspension height built into it. And it's also because the tires, which are IMEX Clod Swamp Dog tires, are bigger than the stock Tamiya tires that are on the King Clod truck. Now, the King Clod, before I forget, in case anybody didn't know, the King Clod's chassis is an ESP Clodzilla II chassis, and the Clodzilla II does not have an adjustable ride height on it. So you can see that if you look at the two bumpers, the height of the bumper on Leviathan is a little bit taller than the bumper on the King Clod. One of the main differences between these two trucks are on the hoods of each one, and on the left, the ESP King Clod has this Chevy small block engine that was originally from a Kyosho High Rider Corvette, while Leviathan has this machined aluminum hood scoop from Arch Manufacturing on it, or excuse me, Arch Machine on it. And this was one of the modifications to the King Clod that I had kind of a hard time deciding if I would take off that small block engine model right there from the hood, because it doesn't exactly look scale. Even on the original Kyosho High Rider Corvette that it came from, it doesn't sit right to my eyes. It sits up way too high, and you can see there. Notice how the valve covers are sticking out, the heads are sticking out, and you can only imagine if that were a real Chevy small block 350. Just imagine where the transmission would be. It'd be sticking out probably into the windshield, coming out through the dashboard inside the cab. So yeah, it does look a little silly on there. And I know it's supposed to be a little cartoony, but ever since I saw the original High Rider Corvette, I remember thinking the same thing. It's mounted way too high. It's also a Chevy 350, so let's be honest, most monster trucks all have big block engines in them, so it's too small for a Clod Buster, for a Chevy monster truck. And also, ever since I first saw this on the Kyosho High Rider Corvette, the first thing I thought of was that. And if you're a Hot Wheels collector, that is a Roger Dodger, which is the name for a Hot Wheels car that's based on a Dodge Charger, early 70s Charger, I believe. And if you notice, it has this comically huge Hemi engine sticking up through the hood. and the valve covers are sticking way up there. It's like way too high, but that's okay. On a Hot Wheels car, I totally get it. You know, Hot Wheel cars are supposed to be kind of cartoonish and silly looking, but on a monster truck, an RC monster truck, it's never really sat well with me that's on there. So that was one thing that if I had built the King Clod on my own, I definitely would not have used that engine sticking up like that. But it is part of the character of the King Clod. I mean, that is what it shows on the ESP catalog on the front cover. It has that huge engine model sticking up like that. But if it were me, if I were building the truck from the beginning, I probably would not have done that. It just doesn't look scale enough for me. And I probably would have done exactly what I did on Leviathan. I would have just used a hood scoop on it. I love the look of the stock Tamiya hood scoop. And on Leviathan, I replaced it with a machined aluminum one. But even the stock plastic Tamiya one, the original one, I even like that one, the way it looks. And it just looks like full-scale Chevy square-bodied monster trucks did back in the 80s. Many of them had hood scoops like this that look like the ones made by Mr. Gasket. And that's why with the Leviathan I used the machined aluminum one from Arch. But that's one of the things that I kind of had a hard time deciding if I would remove that from the King Clod, or, you know, it's part of the character, that cartoonish look to it. That's what makes it, it's one of its characteristics. And so that's why I left it on there, and I didn't have that issue with Leviathan. I could just do whatever I wanted to it. But one of the other differences on the body is that the King Clod has one of these ESP quad tube machined aluminum roll bars on it with 5 ram lights, also made out of aluminum, on top. And with Leviathan, I decided to use a Chatham CNC machined aluminum roll bar, dual tube roll bar. And the Chatham, this is one change I would have done differently if it were up to me. The Chatham CNC roll bar has holes for 4 ram aluminum lights on it. And this is one thing I would have done the same as what's on the King Clod. I would, if I could. Chatham only makes this tube right here with the holes drilled in it for just 4 lights. They don't make one with 5 holes in it, like the ESP one right there. So now that I've been looking at Leviathan for quite a while, it's been finished for a few weeks now, that is one change I probably would have done the same. I just like the look of 5 lights on top better than just 4. And a lot of that has to do with that the stock Tamiya Clod Buster roll bar has 5 lights on it. And I've always liked the way that looks. And when it comes to 80s era monster trucks, the more lights, the better. That's the way they did it back in the day. So that's one thing I would have done the same on built trucks. But Chatham CNC does not make a roll bar tube that has 5 holes drilled in it, so I had no choice. Only had 4. But if Chatham CNC ever does make a 5-hole one, I definitely probably will be getting one, because I do like the look of the 5 lights better. So here's the two trucks side by side facing forward. And from this view, you can see a lot of the differences between the two. And first of all, starting at the bottom there, the King Clod has no wheel spacers on it. So it has a little bit wider front and rear track compared to a stock Clodbuster because it has JPS wheels on it. And JPS wheels have a more negative offset to them, just a little bit. So it's a little bit wider track, but its track width is nowhere near as wide as Leviathan there on the right. Leviathan's JPS wheels have wheel spacers behind them. So each wheel spacer puts an extra 15 millimeters of back spacing behind each wheel. So for a total track increase of 30 millimeters wider. So that's why Leviathan's track width is so huge. And I did that because if you watch some of my previous videos on the construction of Leviathan, That's because the inner sidewalls of the tires were rubbing on the shock absorbers. So I had to put those spacers in there to push out the wheels and tires just a little bit to provide clearance for when the tires were steering to the left or to the right. And in this view, you can see the differences in the steering system. Note how Leviathan has axle mounted servos right here on the bumpers, while the King Clod does not. The King Clod has the stock style Tamiya steering system with the bell cranks, although these bell cranks are machined aluminum ones made by UK Monsters that are ball bearing supported, but it's the same basic style steering system that has the steering servo mounted way in the center of the chassis. Just one big servo in there, while Leviathan has front and rear servos, one mounted on each axle. And Leviathan's steering system is a lot better, it has less play compared to what's on the King Clod, but I have to admit, I've never liked the look of axle mounted servos. They just look ugly. Simply, there's no way around that. They just never appealed to my eyes. And now, performance-wise, they're better, no doubt about it. No arguments at all. No questions about that. But just as far as the looks go, I've always much preferred the look of the steering system, like what's on the King Clod on the left. And that's got nothing to do with performance. That's just based on looks. Also, from this view, you can see the differences in the front bumpers. Leviathan has a stock style worn winch bumper on it. That's made by Chatham CNC. It's made out of aluminum. While the King Clod has an ESP dual tube bumper with the grill guard on it. And that is a special one made for the King Clod out of anodized gold tubing. So that's the only one I've ever seen like that, along with the twin tube lower bumper down here. That one's also made out of gold. And I've never seen those on any other truck before, and I've never seen them in any ESP catalog, and it was never on their website. So I believe they were specially made for the King Clod, since it has a red and gold color scheme. But that was an example of where I chose the Chatham CNC bumper on Leviathan just because it was different. I wanted the front of the trucks to look different from one another, and also with the grills too. The King Clod has a 1980s era stock Tamiya Clod Buster bumper with the Chevy bow tie logo right in there, whereas if you look at Leviathan's front grille, it does not. It's the exact same style grille, but no Chevy bow tie logo right there. From this viewpoint too, you can also see the differences in the hoods right there. Also, you can see how comically huge and how high up that engine sticks up. It's not huge, like I said, it's a Chevy small block 350 model, but you can see how it sticks up like way too high. The valve covers sticking way up there, the head's sticking way up, whereas that's the way they should look. It's supposed to look like that with the engine and the valve covers way down in the hood and just the hood scoop sticking up like that. But that's the one change that one thing as I said before, I probably would not have done if I had built the King Clod from scratch. But this view too, you can also see the height difference once again. Leviathan on the right there is a bit taller if you look at the heights of the bumpers compared to one another. Here is the rear view of the two trucks side by side. So just like with the front view, you can see how much taller Leviathan is. And it's not really super huge tall. It's not like, 4 or 5 inches taller. So the videos I did of Leviathan may be kind of hard to tell how much taller it is compared to a stock height Clod Buster. And the King Clod is about the same height as a stock Clod. I don't have a stock Clod Buster anymore, so I don't have anything really to compare it to. But I think it's about the same height as a stock Tamiya Clod Buster. But you can get an idea of the height differences between the two in this view. Also, Leviathan is just not super duper crazy tall. And it might be in the future. Like I said, I would love to run IMEX Jumbo Kong tires on it. So at that point, yeah, it would be much, much taller than the King Clod. But at least right now, it's not super duper tall. But in this view too, just like with the front, you can see the differences in the bumpers and the steering servos, where they're mounted. The Leviathan's rear bumper is also made by Chatham, and it's an aluminum replica of the stock Tamiya bumper. And the rear bumper on the King Clod is an ESP dual tube bumper made from gold anodized aluminum tubing, just like the front one. And same thing with the twin tube lower bumpers down here, same thing. Those are made out of gold tubing. On Leviathan, the lower bumpers are made by Pargu, which has the servo mounted to it, just like on the front. And also on the King Clod, its rear steering is just like the front, has the stock style bell cranks, which are made by UK Monsters. But from here you can see the differences in the two trucks. Similar, but not quite the same. And here are the two trucks back to back, so you can compare the height difference of the two rear bumpers. Once again, Leviathan is just a little bit taller, not too much, but just a tiny bit. And I don't think I mentioned this before, but on Leviathan, most of its machined aluminum components are from Hess Machine, the gear cases, axle tubes, and steering knuckles, while the aluminum ladder bars are from Pargu. And on the King Clod, all of those machined aluminum gear cases, axle tubes, steering knuckles, and ladder bars are from JPS. And there are a few similarities between the two. Both have JPS wheels, except Leviathan's JPS wheels are called the plain style. That's what JPS called them in their catalogs. They were called the plain wheels, while the King Clod has what JPS called tri-blade wheels. The drive lines are similar to one another. They both have Tamiya stock Clodbuster plastic gears in them, stock steel Clodbuster axle shafts and stub axles, and they also both have the Stormer Hobbies 4-to-1 gear reduction units. So there's the Leviathans right there, and there's the King Clods right there. The motors are different though. The King Clod has Astroflight Pullmaster motors, and Leviathan has Team Brood Racing motors, 540 motors in it. So a little bit different there in the power supplies, but the two trucks are, driveline wise, are quite similar. That's one of the few things that are similar between these two. But so that's just a little overall view of these two trucks and how they are different, and a couple ways of how they're similar. And I'm glad I built Leviathan, because just from the builder's perspective here, it allowed me to kind of get some of those creative juices flowing so I could build a Clodbuster the way I wanted to. And that was pretty refreshing. I would hate to have just all these ideas in the back of my head and not be able to actually make them become a reality. And oh, one of the difference too, before I forget too, notice the wheelbase difference between Leviathan and the King Clod. King Clod has a stock wheelbase, while Leviathan's wheelbase is 1 inch longer than stock. And that's why the front rear axles, the center line of the axles, don't quite line up with the wheel wells on Leviathan compared to on the King Clod. On the King Clod they line up perfectly. But that's one difference that I forgot to mention before. But so I'm glad that I was able to build Leviathan, got some of those creative juices flowing, and got some of those ideas that were in the back of my head and made those ideas a reality. But I'm also glad I have the King Clod too, because there's something just in my mind undeniably cool about having a truck that was a company's demo vehicle and appeared in their catalog and on their magazine ads. So I've never had anything like that before in all my hobbies and stuff like that. So it's just so cool to see that on the catalog, which I still own, and have the actual truck that's pictured in the catalog in my possession. So that is so cool. But anyways, so those are these two trucks side by side. So once again, shout out to Kenny. Thank you for the video idea. And hopefully this shows you some of the differences between these two trucks. And to most people, they probably look the same when they're not side by side like this. But in reality, if you look at them up close, they actually are quite different. And I hope this video shows those differences. But if you want to see more of these two trucks in detail, take a look at any of those other videos that I made that are on my channel in the RC Monster Trucks playlist. And there's tons and tons of details that I provided in those videos, so you'll find out everything about these trucks, both all put together like this and also the chassis with the bodies removed. So there's a lot of differences there between the electronics and stuff like that I didn't go into in this video. But if anybody has any questions about these two, please, by all means, leave them below in the comments and I will gladly answer them. And before I close out here, I also had a question too. Which one do you prefer? Which one do you like? If you had to pick between one or the other, between the ESP King Clod or the Leviathan, which one would you like better? Which one do you think is cooler looking? Or maybe neither. That's possible too. You know, these types of trucks, these show trucks from the 1980s, you know, they're not everybody's cup of tea. I totally get that. I understand that. So maybe you don't like either one. That's possible too. And feel free to state that below. But if you have a preference of one over the other, please. And why? Why do you like one over the other? Please let me know. I'm genuinely very curious. So I do read all the comments below. So if you have any questions or anything, I'll be happy to answer them. But if you have an opinion one way or the other between these two, or neither, or both, please feel free to leave them below. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll catch you in the next video.